Welcome, everybody. Hello. I am so excited to welcome you to our very special episode of Voices of WIA because it's live at our 2023 Annual Conference. WIA exists to educate, equip, and encourage women in Christian apologetics. We are passionate about helping women to love God with their minds by growing in their knowledge of the evidence for their faith and learning how to defend it with grace. So if you are watching online, do us a favor right now and go say hi in the chat box. That chat is where you can ask questions for later in the show. You can make comments, and it's also where you can get yourself in the running for our giveaways this evening, which we'll get to in just a second. In-person attendees, you can submit your questions and your comments through the app, the conference app on your phone. All you have to do if you haven't downloaded yet is scan the QR code or go to app.wia, W-I-A, in all caps, .events, and it will prompt you after that. So speaking of our giveaways, we normally have just one. Tonight we have three. We have 2 copies of the Mama Bear Apologetics Guide to Sexuality, and one of you in-person ladies is going to get a free access to a set of recordings of conference sessions, all the conference sessions for this weekend. And that access to those recordings will be available in about 4 to 6 weeks after the conference, but it will be accessible to you for 1 year from the date that you activate that conference account. So, by the way, it starts in less than 1 hour. So for all of you who are watching online, if you haven't bought a ticket to the live stream yet, you still have time to do that. If you happen to be in the Anaheim area and you're local, we are at Knott Avenue Christian Church. You can just come down and join us. It's not too late to do that either. And if you happen to be interested in the live stream, you're watching online and you want to do the live stream, however, you happen to be in a time zone that you think might make it difficult for you to catch all of the sessions, you should know that WIA has made it possible for you to watch previously aired sessions from the conference weekend, and you'll have till Sunday, July 11th at 11:45 to get them all watched. So if you have to miss one because it's too late, you have till Sunday night to catch up. So really, also, once you download the app for the conference, that app is time zone friendly, and all of the sessions and the updates to the schedule will be on your app. And in-person attendees, that's true for you too. So your app will keep you updated on everything that's going on here at the conference. Okay, now with all of that, here are our panel members for this evening. We're going to be talking about the full armor of God, how to equip the next generation to stand firm in their faith. Wednesday night, just before I flew out here, I taught an apologetic session for a church, and I showed them graphically just how steep the decline is of Christianity right now. It's one thing to talk about it and sense it. It's another thing to kind of see it visually. So it's super important that we understand how to rescue the next generation from secularism and have them stay strong in their faith. So our panel members for this evening who are going to help us have this conversation. First of all, we have Kelli Johnson. Her life took a dramatic turn when she became mysteriously and seriously ill with chronic pain. For 7 years, specialists have failed to discover the cause. However, the Lord, in his faithfulness, has used this time of suffering to draw her into developing curriculum and Bible studies for women and youth in her community. She teaches apologetics and other theological topics at her church. She's a homeschool mom of 3, and she's been married for 16 years. Welcome, Kelli Johnson. And over here on my right, we have Amy Davison. Amy joined the Mama Bear Apologetics team in January of 2019. I bet you know who those folks are. After graduating with her apologetics degree from Southwestern Baptist Theological Seminary in 2018, she's taken an active role in writing about sexual ethics and God's purpose in sexuality, along with serving as co-host for the Mama Bear Apologetics podcast. Amy and her husband, Mike, are both Air Force veterans who have a heart for helping parents and kids learn to love God with their minds. Please welcome Amy Davison. And I'm Lori Morrow. In addition to my role as host of Voices of WIA, I think it's important for all of us as everyday Christians to understand the need to challenge popular cultural assumptions with the truth of the Christian worldview. So welcome everybody, welcome online viewers, welcome in-person viewers, and welcome to our guests. Okay. All right, I'm so glad that you're here tonight. In Ephesians 6, Paul itemizes the equipment that we are going to need to fight the spiritual battle ahead of us. We need to teach our kids how to use it too. And the very first thing he mentions is truth. Because if truth does not exist, then sisters, chaos and evil will. So, can you guys tell me what you think might be practical tips that we can use to help our children understand the nature of truth as well as the existence of truth in today's secular world?
Well, I think it's important that we catechize our kids first in the
Mhm.
faith, and that's just foundational, repetitive truths that can lay that foundation for them as they encounter ideas that are contrary. So, as a homeschool mom, we catechize our kids, and it's proven extremely fruitful in that. And that lays the truth foundation of what the Christian worldview tells us, and so that's kind of like my practical tip I tell all moms is to catechize your kids because if you don't do it, the world will.
Amy?
I think exposing kids to the idea of recognizing that all of these claims that we're seeing in culture, these are attempted truth claims. And so with our kids, if we can expose them to comparing and contrasting, okay, what does the Islamic worldview say? What does the Hinduism worldview say? The Wiccan, the Christian, and then which one actually best corresponds to reality? That helps train our kids to think well, which is what they need in our culture. Our
Mhm.
culture today wants our kids to react emotionally rather than think critically. But if we can teach our kids how to think well, to recognize and empathize with emotion, but then say, okay, wait a second, what exactly are they saying about the nature of reality, who God is, and then be able to compare that and be able to articulate it well, then they're just going to be able to stand firm in
Mhm.
culture and be a beacon, even
Mhm.
amongst their friends.
And having those conversations regularly around the dinner table and in teachable moments, I would bet that both of you agree that the more we have those conversations with our kids, the more they will see those things pop up and be able to connect the dots more quickly for themselves. Would you agree with that?
Yeah, we play a game called like the pause game we talked about. So if you're watching movies or you're listening to the radio, it's so easy just to pause it and ask your kid, is this true? Does this correspond with reality? And it gets them in the habit of questioning every image, every, idea that is thrown at them and say, wait a minute, let's think about this critically. Let's see if this corresponds with reality. Let's see if this is the truth of God.
Mhm.
So
And by questioning, you mean, oh, I'm sorry, Amy. You mean evaluate.
yeah.
Is this truth claim, this alternative truth claim that's being offered to me, is it really true? That's what we mean when we talk about questioning. Yes.
Absolutely.
Okay. Do you have anything else you want to add?
No, I was going to say, and it's so important too, because even our high schoolers, there's so many that we can often think that if we homeschool or if we have our kids in private school, then they are getting this education. But very often within these settings, we're teaching from a biblical worldview, but we're
Mhm.
not teaching the other side of the coin of what is a worldview. What are the claims that are being made? So many high schoolers I've encountered, I have gone through their entire lives from pre-K
Mhm.
3 all the way up till 12th grade, and they have no idea that truth exists. A vital aspect of the nature of God exists
Right.
and it's knowable. And so when we can start training our kids in that, it's impressive because it now all of a sudden they start seeing these claims everywhere and they can wrestle with it even when they're outside of our own homes, which is what we
Love
want
that.
them to be, is to be effective with the armor.
Absolutely. In verse 15, Paul talks about readiness to share the gospel, which is why apologetics is obviously so important. Because secular people are not coming to us, we're going to have to go to them, and our kids will encounter lots of secular people, and we want them to, for that purpose, to be able to bring them to Christ. So, if you had one or two specific topics that you could encourage moms to kind of focus in on in order to get their kids to be prepared to share the gospel when the opportunity arises, what do you suppose you would tackle first?
Probably the biggest thing for our kids now is how to navigate a conversation well. Our generation, I mean, it started with millennial generation. We don't know how to have conversations with each other, how to think well. And so, with our kids, if we teach them how to approach a conversation with truth and grace, meaning we're listening to understand, not to respond, because especially with kids, they may need to work on tact a little bit. And so if we're like, okay, listen to what they have to say, they have justifiable reasons for what they believe, even if those reasons are false. And so listen, empathize, understand, and then gently ask expository questions like, okay, well, how did you come to that belief? I think Greg Koukle's Tactics is a fantastic resource for you to use as a parent. Start implementing those questions with your kids of what do you mean by this buzzword, especially if there's a word like equality, justice being tossed out there. Pause the conversation, tell your kids it's okay. Well, ask them what do they mean, because they might have a definition of justice that is very different from your own, so we can't assume. And then to, wow, how did you come to that conclusion? What led to that? And then gently evaluate, okay, yes, I see why you came to this conclusion. However, it's not actually true, or it's not accurate, or what about in this situation? And it's just really helpful for kids to help them think well so they have better conversations and more fruitful ministry opportunities.
Excellent. What would you think?
I would say probably being critical thinkers and logical thinkers. Like, does point A actually lead to point B, right? And they can do that at a very young age. We can't underestimate what they are actually capable of. They're very good thinkers, and they're usually thinking through things. And, everybody has a worldview, whether you're little, big, old, everybody has a worldview. And they came by that worldview by experience, by things taught to them. And so we have to remember that when we're evangelizing as well, or our kids are having conversations in school. They need to be able to have good conversations. They need to understand that this worldview is probably a big tangled mess within their personal experiences, and relationship is how we sort through that. And so we want to be in relationship with other people. We need to teach our kids how to have good, healthy relationships where communication is part of that, so that they can kind of start untangling those false ideas or those illogical conclusions.
Yeah, that's true, because those conversations are hard to have, even for those of us who are adults. But it does happen, I think, more easily, more naturally, and much more amicably when you are in a relationship, a close relationship, when they know that the fact that you are correcting them is not coming from a place of agitation, it's not coming from a competitive spirit, it's not coming from any kind of condescending spirit. When they know that you love them, those difficult conversations are easier to have, I think. Okay. Then in verse 16, Paul talks about the use of the word faith. And I think there is a huge misunderstanding about what faith really is, what it really means, and what it doesn't mean. And lots of people, both inside the church as well as outside the church, assume that true faith does not ask questions, it doesn't seek truth, it simply obeys blindly. And I would like to see if the three of us can dispel that myth a little bit tonight, because I think that's a big topic. And I think it comes up with our kids. I think it comes up inside our churches and our small groups, as well as outside the church specifically. So let's start with you, Amy. What do you think about that?
So I love that challenge. Jonathan Morrow probably gave the best example that I've ever heard with regards to this idea that faith is blind and you're just not using your brain, you're checking it at the door. And what he described it as is faith and reason are like the two wings of an aircraft. You need both to be able to fly. And so anyone who, even baby Christians who are just starting out, they have faith, they have justifiable reasons for their faith. Now it's often experiential. It could be the Holy Spirit working in their life. It could be something that happened to them in the past. Those are still justifiable reasons. That's an aspect of apologetics. And so often that's maybe where we start, but then God starts working on us. We get challenges. We have family members who are wrestling or struggling. Maybe our children have a question in the faith. I joke that, kids, if you're in the car longer than 20 minutes, they turn into philosophers and they start asking you these questions. And now all of a sudden you have to do research on something you had no idea your 6-year-old was wrestling with. And that's where we start. And what's so blessing, and what a blessing that is we have this faith and now we have these reasons. And so often God brings us more reasons to do more research. And so the depth of our faith grows as we grow as a Christian.
Oh, for sure. I would agree with that. What about you? What do you think with regard to the faith issue?
I think that's perfect. Yeah, I like the idea of Because with wings, you need balance, you need
Yes.
both. And so you can't just have one without the other. And I think a lot of times your natural personality or disposition might lend you to want to only go one way,
Yeah.
and you kind of have to fight the the pull and balance that out. So just having a balanced approach to that.
Yeah, I would agree with that. And I think too, I think it's a mistake for us to think, and particularly with our kids, I think our kids are very prone to thinking that when you have faith in God, you don't ever doubt. You just never ever doubt. And if you doubt, there's something wrong with your faith. And we need to make sure they understand that because God made us with a rational mind, rational minds question, rational minds evaluate. And so therefore, doubt is really not necessarily a symptom of having no faith. It's a symptom of having an intellect. It's a symptom of having the kind of mind, the rational mind that God intends for us to have. And so we are welcome then to question and think and dig and wrestle until we come to the truth. And that isn't something that should be considered a weakness of our faith or out of bounds or anything. And I think if we help them understand that, that will help them strengthen their faith and be less shaken when they do have doubts. So, okay. Last question for this section. How important is the role of prayer in the spiritual battle and why? And if you had an idea of some things that we should remember to pray for our children, what do you suppose that would be?
Well, verse 12 of Ephesians 6 talks about that this is a spiritual battle. And verse 18 reminds us to pray in the spirit for everything. And we have to remember as mothers, as grandmothers, as just women of the faith, that this battle is won on our knees. And it is the spirit that goes before us that does the saving and the heart change. And so that burden is not upon us as apologists or as parents. So do not underestimate the power of prayer. Um, it's just, there's been so many testimonies of great men of faith from our past that they came to the Lord because of the prayers of their mothers.
Yeah.
And it's just amazing to see God work in that way because it's not in our strength, it's not even in our intellect, it is in the power of the Spirit. And so we need to be on our knees for our kids and for the next generation and for our families. It's essential.
I agree. I agree. What do you think, Amy?
Yeah, no, and I think it's so vital as well. I mean, everything you said, 100%. Because one of the ways that it reminds me is Satan can sometimes be most effective when he makes us feel like we're alone. And as moms, especially, we can kind of get, okay, we pray before meals and we pray before bed, like we can get ritualistic with our prayers. But when we help our children understand that, no, this is regular communication, that God is with you and the Spirit will groan for you when words cannot even come into play, when we can help our children recognize that prayer not only connects them to God, but reminds them that they're not alone in the midst of the battlefield, which they may feel at times, especially in the lunchroom or the locker room or around their friends. No, you have got spiritual access to God at all times. It helps them to be able to tap into that spiritual armor and be connected with God and also see him working in the spiritual realm as well as in the physical.
Yeah, I agree. And I've heard pastors talk about in the past that there are some things that God doesn't do until we pray. And I think one of the things that we can pray as moms is that they would have an encounter with the Lord themselves to take them wherever they are in their spiritual walk to the next step, whatever that might look like. We can pray for the people in their lives that they need to reach, to be open, for God to open doors for conversations. And there's just all sorts of things. And quite frankly, all of us, including ourselves, but also for our children, every now and then we just have to be honest with the Lord and say, Lord, give me the guts. Give me the guts to open my mouth and say something. Give me the courage to be willing to stand up for you, to speak up for you, to open a door for you, to point in your direction. Just give me the guts. And I think that God honors that prayer. It's right in line with what he's asking us to do. So, okay, it is time for our giveaway. So normally we have one book giveaway, but since this is a special episode, we have special giveaways. And one of the things that we're going to do is to give away one copy of the Mama Bear Apologetics Guide to Sexuality to our YouTube audience and to our other online audience. So Amy, would you tell us a little bit about that particular book, why it was written, who it will help, and all those sorts of those kinds of things? Give us a little description.
Yeah, that book was one that wasn't in our purview, but was brought to us by our publisher saying this is a need. And this was before a lot of what we're seeing, kind of the ideological takeover happening in culture. And it happened right before COVID. So, I mean, perfect time to write a book is when everything shut down. You had nothing to do. So, we dove into this because this is a subject that is so volatile. It is so tense, and it can be dark in places. And so we devoted an entire year of just doing all the research that you probably don't want to do. Our histories are jacked up on our computers permanently. And so what we did is we took the top challenges in culture that are not only reaching you parents, but are also reaching your children, some as young as kindergarten. And we went and did the legwork. We looked into it. We did it from our roar perspective, which is where we evaluate the claims that are there. We acknowledge everything that is true, right, justified, but then we also offer discernment and recognize where they fall short, what they're actually claiming about who you are, who God is, the value of you as a human person, and the spiritual and physical implications of what we do with our body and why that matters. And then we put it in a concise book that unfortunately they wouldn't allow us to be 800 pages long. We seriously could have done it and made it so that way you as parents, grandmothers, we have teenagers even reading this book so that you can get bite-sized accessible chunks as well as resources in the back of the book to do further research to better know how to articulate God's design for sexuality and how to interact with culture with truth and grace while not compromising the faith.
Well, it's awfully timely. I can't imagine any of us that who has a child or a grandchild or who works with the youth in your church or a small group or anything like that, who wouldn't see the need for that right now, because it seems like the need has just kind of gone through the roof. And it's very similar to the topic you're going to be teaching on this weekend.
Yeah,
Yes?
absolutely. Yeah, this weekend we're going to be looking at biblical sexuality, what it is, how it's affecting not only our churches, but our families and our kids, and how we can relay truth to our children as well as work on our outreach as well. Because again, this is a volatile subject that is often very polarizing, but Christ often went right down the middle. And instead, he met people where they at, and he never reduced them to their sin, but instead he reached them for the gospel. And so that is what our goal is this weekend with the talk. And how do we take what culture is giving us to better equip our kids,
Mhm.
but then also to reach people who may have been marginalized by this culture with the gospel? Because all of us, regardless of our identity or our orientation, desperately need Jesus.
Fabulous. Okay, so our giveaways this evening, we have one that's been randomly picked from our YouTube audience, and that goes to search scripture. So if you will go to the chat really quickly and put your name in, say hello to our moderators, they will send you a link. They will contact you to get that to you to tell you next steps. And from Air Meat, our random pick is Eric J. So if you'll do the same thing, Eric, if you will just hop into that chat, our moderators will get a hold of you for next steps on that. Our next giveaway is for the in-person audience that is picked randomly for the access to the recordings. And I can't see a name. So we're going to talk about the access to the recordings for just a second. So basically, obviously, everything that's going on this weekend, there will be a recording that is available to you. It'll take a few weeks to get it ready, but then that access will be available to you for 1 year. I think I said that earlier. You'll have it for 1 year. So that way, you don't even have to take notes. I mean, you can just sit and relax and put your feet up and just listen, because then you'll have a whole year to go back and rewatch everything if you want to and take notes later. So have fun. Okay, so let's see if we've got a person, an actual name at this point. Yes, no, back there? Do we? Okay. Okay, I got it. Woohoo! Okay, the winner is Grace Sutt. And so congratulations. She now nobody you can just look at everybody else's notes. You don't have to watch this weekend. We're write notes this weekend. So just find our volunteers and our staff, and we'll help you get that access to that recording. So congratulations. Thanks so much for being here tonight, y'all. We really, really do appreciate it. Such a great episode. Okay, moving on with the rest of the questions. Many parents assume that protecting their kids' faith means sheltering them from all the challenges and questions. I know I did this a lot. I really thought that just sheltering them would help their maturity catch up to what's going on in culture. But we want to talk tonight a little bit about helping parents think about the possibility of thoughtfully challenging your kids' faith, but within a controlled environment. So, what do you guys have to say about that? Is that a good idea? Is that a bad idea? And how do we get started doing that.
I can completely empathize with the bubble parent thing. Like that was my whole goal when it first started with my kids. I thought this is what Christian parenting is. You have
Yeah.
Veggie Tale on repeat. You
Right.
got the Awana soundtracks, and you nailed it.
Mhm.
Uh, until culture walks through your door. And so they've actually done studies and they've compared and contrast two types of Christian parents. So you've got the bubble parents who never allow their children to experience any form of culture, any activity that is done throughout the church. Those are the only ones that their kids are exposed to.
Yeah.
The Dove Network is the only thing the kids are allowed to watch. And then you have more of the proactive parents, the Christian parents. So these parents maybe allow their kids to watch a little more, I hate to say dicey, but a little more worldly material. But what they do is like Kelli suggested, and we totally advocate at Mama Bear, is the pause game. You discuss it and you say, okay, what is this character doing? Why are they motivated to do this? What are the implications of their actions, both now and in the future? And what they've found is that when those two sets of kids went off to college, the bubble kids lost their minds, whereas the kids who are allowed to engage with culture to be able to reason it from the protection of their home, they had statistically less risky decision making behavior. And this makes sense. If we are given armor, which every Christian, if your little one needed water wings in the baptismal, they got issued spiritual armor too. Those kids who are actually trained on how to wield their armor more effectively are more proficient on the battlefield, whereas the kids that never got to use it, never got to practice, often walked away from the faith or succumbed to culture very quickly because again, they were shielded on the battlefield, but when we do that, we don't remove them from the fight, we just make them an easier target. So, we're not advocating getting your kid access to HBO Max, but what we are saying is that if you're walking in the store and you see something, or if they overhear a conversation, take that opportunity that the world has given you to point back to Christ, because it's actually going to help your kid when they articulate it to their friends, which they're going to do.
I always talk about that ignorance does not mean innocence. And we do not want ignorant children. And so, as a homeschool mom, I think a lot of people look at the way we raise our children as we are bubble parents. And we're not. We just want to, I view it more of a greenhouse kind of like when you live in harsh climates, which we do. You do not put your little teeny sapling out into the elements and say good luck, right? You keep them in the greenhouse until they develop a little deeper root. Then you slowly introduce them to the environment. You put them outside for a bit, you bring them back in, you test them in harsher elements slowly but surely, and you keep pushing not the boundaries but the stability and discernment that your children are growing in. And you can tell different kids will be different at different stages. But once they start showing you discernment, then you kind of can leave them out a little longer or let them, experience more intense topics or ideas and have deeper discussions. But we, I do not like to think of my kids in a bubble, but more of a greenhouse, right? Slowly deepening those root systems and controlled environments where we can challenge them and allow them to experience reality.
Yeah, I think actually both of those analogies, the bubble that's easily popped and the greenhouse, are really, really helpful. And I think it's pretty much like everything else. Um, we all get better at the things that we practice. You don't have to start off at expert level having these conversations. The more we try, the more we get started, the more we just have, conversations teachably as they kind of arise naturally and organically in our day-to-day operations. We get better at noticing the opportunities. We get better at making the most of those opportunities. And so I think it's the inertia that kind of keeps us from trying, or that intimidates us into being still or silent or waiting, putting it off a little longer till you know more. But the more we just get started, I think we all grow in our ability to have those conversations. And that's therefore, it's a good time to start no matter where you are. It's never too early to start. Okay, we all talked about before the show about becoming the kind of person who essentially is a resource for the next generation, somebody who's unafraid to answer questions and being unafraid to show love and patience towards kids, your own kids or kids in your youth group, that are openly showing that they are following culture's lead rather than Christ's lead. And I would like to know if either of you have personal examples that you might have to encourage us how to do things well. And I think, Kelli, you specifically had an incident like that, and it was a really great learning experience for everybody. Can you share a little bit about that?
So last year I hosted an apologetic weekly meeting for youth, and it was middle school to high school, mostly high school. And we had everyone from homeschool kids to extremely secular children who did not want to be there, but their parents were like, "You're going." And so we had one girl in particular show up in her pride sweatshirt and basically tell me, I'm, you know, however she identified, I think it was a lesbian or pansexual or something to that nature. She goes, "What are you going to do about it?" And I said, to this young girl, I said, "You know what? I'm going to love you really, really well, but I'm also going to keep telling you the truth every single week." And she showed up every week, and every week a little bit more of her armor would come off. And she would start asking questions and then pretend like she wasn't paying attention. And then it just was this progressive, beautiful thing. And I would ask her about her interests. I was trying to build a relationship with her. And it turned out really beautiful because uh, I now have her phone number. I've commissioned her as an artist to, you know, make pieces for me, and she just couldn't believe that a Christian homeschool mom would, I get a little emotional, a Christian homeschool mom would love her well in spite of her attitude, her identity that she thought was hers. And I love her so dearly, and I pray for her daily. And because of it, some doors have started to open
Sure.
over the year. So it's amazing what relationship, love, and truth will do.
And so taking an interest in her went a long way in just softening her and making her open
Yeah.
to hear everything that you had to say.
Yeah.
Okay.
She was shocked by it, like
Yeah.
absolutely befuddled that a Christian would care.
Yeah.
So she had a very poor misconception of what Christianity
Right.
really looks like.
Right. Did you have anything you might want to add to that?
I have almost an identical experience, and there's a speaker that I heard, and I loved what she said. She said, Satan knows our name, but he calls us by our sin. Jesus knows our sin, and he calls us by name. And so much of secular culture, especially when it comes to LGBTQ ideology, they paint Christians as a certain caricature of being closed minded, hateful bigots that are just looking for somebody who isn't following this hyper fundamentalist view just to pounce on them and
Right.
destroy them. And when you can actually love someone like Christ, like how he spoke to the woman at the well, and see them, recognize their humanity, and eat with them, not to affirm them in their sin, but to reach them with the gospel, it blows their mind. And so I was at a conference talking on biblical sexuality, and I had a girl who was 17 come up. She'd asked me a question, and then out of nowhere, she just goes, "Well, I just want you to know that I'm gay and I didn't want to be here, and I was made to be here by my mom." And I'm like, "Oh, I'm sorry." And she goes, "No, but I want to." So she'd gone through one talk, there were three others, and she goes, "But I want to stay." She goes, "Because I've never heard it like this." And when we can reach people with the gospel, when we see them as equals, and no, you're just somebody who I used to be, just a different sin. And I love you enough to reach you with the gospel. It does. It completely shatters the wall. And it may take time, like building that relationship of recognizing that I'm a safe person that this person can come to. Because so much of that defensive, that hostility is often a protection to keep them from being hurt again. And when we can take the time and love somebody diligently, like Christ pursued after us, oh my goodness, the witnessing opportunities and the growth that occurs for the gospel is amazing.
Christ is compelling.
Yeah.
And somehow we forget that sometimes.
Right?
He's completely compelling. And the gospel is life changing.
Yeah.
And everybody wants that.
Yeah. They're all looking for it. We're all looking for it. And when they see it, it's incredible.
By the way, would you say that line one more time? Because that is a rider downer, y'all. That's how we say it in Texas.
Satan knows our name, but he calls us by our sin. Jesus knows our sin and he calls us by name.
That's
In fact,
awesome.
Isaiah 43:1, Hero Jerusalem, I know you. I've called you by name. You are mine. It's beautiful.
Yeah, that's really awesome. Okay, how does social media and the internet play a role in their faith development? And what do we need to know as parents to be responsible in helping our kids manage their technology?
Social media is kind of terrifying, right? Because there's no way to filter it. Not well. So there's good and bad with social media, and it really depends on your kid. Each child is going to be different. So, just to share a little bit of how we've navigated social media. So, I've got three boys, 15, 13, and 11. And so, 15-year-old, he was getting active in sports. So, we said, okay, we are going to do the cell phone. And we were very blunt with our son. We're like, look, buddy, we just want you to know nobody has privacy. Not anyone. We are accountable to God. We're accountable to bosses, spouses, family, whatever. So if you're thinking that you're going to have privacy with this thing, we're just going to pop that little bubble right now. You're not. Um, we also shared with them that this phone is on loan to you. We are letting you have this phone. We are going to observe how you use it. And if you show immaturity, if you are looking at things you're not supposed to, if you have a tech savvy friend, which every one of your children has, who knows how to get around the blocks, even the whole Bark phone app, we will take the phone away. You will lose it. It is not a right, it is a gift. And so we gave him a cell phone. He was doing well for a little while. And then we started looking at the conversations and noticing the conversations with his friends were spiraling. There were TikTok videos that were being sent from friends, which you don't have to have a TikTok account to be able to view those, that he was observing. And so we said, okay, we're pulling this away now. And we took it away for a time and then gradually gave it back with the statement that, okay, if you start messing up again, we're going to remove the phone, because eventually your child's going to leave the house and they're going to get a cell phone. So while I would love to just cut it off, my husband's like, no, we need to train them on how to use it well. And so to do that, it requires gradual inoculation, observation of your children, put the blocks in place, pick their phone up at random times when they're not expecting it and be like, hey, security check, we're going to see how things are going on. Look through the phone, and when need be, take it away. Also recognize signs of addiction. This means hyper focus on the phone. Your child starts having panic attacks if you try to remove the phone. My mother-in-law is a RN nurse, and she has a teenager come in every single week who's suicidal because mom and dad finally took the phone away or the PlayStation away. And this is the sign of an addiction, not a previous one. So if you start noticing that your child is reclusive, hiding away, trying to keep their phone a secret from you, always on it all the time, and they get twitchy when you take it away, it might be time to really start taking a break from that. And digital detox, I'm blanking on the author. Look up the book Digital Detox on Amazon. Great book on how to help your family unplug from technology a bit and reinstitute it in healthy ways.
Excellent. And by the way, I just want to remind everybody, if you are in person or online, submit your questions for a Q&A if you have any. And then let's go ahead. What do you think as far as what have you seen in your own home and in your youth group with respect to helping our kids manage their technology well?
I think being good models of
Mhm.
being healthy technology users,
Yeah.
that starts with that. You can't put limits on your kids if you yourself don't have limits because they observe that. It's humbling as well, especially when my kids are exactly her same ages, 15, almost 13, and 11. And we're also in sports, and phones are a new thing, a necessary thing because we travel and we're out of state, and we need to contact them. And but we've explained to them, we lay out very strict rules, like you said, like, here are the guidelines. If you break these are the consequences. That way there's no, oh, I didn't know, you know, conversations. And so and then you have to stay on top of it. You cannot be passive with technology. You have to be completely active and involved. You have to read their cell phone all the time when they're not expecting it. And we explained to them, like, you don't really need it all the time. Just we have a cabinet that they put it in the media cabinet. You can ask permission to use it, that kind of thing. So it is in our house, it also is not a right, it is a privilege, and you can lose that privilege very quickly. But social media is tough for adults. So how much harder for immature, moldable young minds? That struggle is much stronger.
Yeah,
So
and it's just everywhere. I mean, it is everywhere. They live on social media so often. When I was growing up, I'm sure it's the same for you too. As soon as the school bell rang, you could put all of your school relationships, if you're having a hardship with a teacher or a hardship with, friends at school, that just went away at least until the next day. And now that's not the case because of social media. So I think that's even though it's difficult, I know how hard it is to kind of take an active role in that with your kids. But I think those are some really wise strategies as far as dealing with that. Okay. All right. So if we're going to do this well, we need to have some resources. So for those of you who are maybe new to Voices of WIA, there are a whole cache of past episodes that allow you to peruse the videos, lots of different topics, lots of different speakers, lots of good perspectives on all sorts of a really wide variety of apologetics concepts and worldview concepts. So those are great ways for you to kind of get your feet wet as to how you might have these conversations at home with your kids. WIA's YouTube channel has a lot of those. You can find those there on the YouTube channel. But if you guys had a couple of easy, accessible favorites, what would those be?
So there's a lot of really great online resources. And what comes to mind, especially having teens, is I love the teen resources because I can't know all the things all the time. And so if there's a group out there that's doing a lot of the legwork, man, they're worth their weight in gold. So Axis is one really great ministry. They send weekly emails right to you and they're talking about the top issues. Same with the Culture Translator. If you just Google that, another great resource. They send weekly newsletters. Okay, this is what Ariana Grande and Taylor Swift is saying, and which I'm grateful for because I don't follow either one of them. And here's the latest TikTok craze that's going through on your kid's phone. It's a fantastic resource that's given right to you, and they summarize it beautifully. So as for books, if we're talking favorite books, anything by Nancy Pearcey is solid. I absolutely love her work. And this is especially great if you've got a kid in your home who's the analytical kid. They want details, they want facts, they want statistics. Nancy Pearcey does a fantastic job with her research, not only giving philosophical evidence, but scientific, theological. It's so well rounded to where if you've got a kid who wants to know the reason why, these are resources written at an adult but accessible level that you can then read and be able to infuse in your conversations with your kids because so many kids don't realize that the Christian faith is intellectually robust. And man, when you can drop a statistic, an archaeological find on your kid, you blow their mind. It's awesome.
How about you? What are your favorite resources?
honestly, Mama Bear Apologetics is some of my
Aw.
favorite. No, seriously, my son read the sexuality book and it changed his life, especially as a homeschooled kid going, he's a competitive basketball player going into like very kind of rougher situations, rougher crowds. And it just, he loved it. But I love Sean McDowell for
Oh, yeah.
young, quick little things. He's so cool. I'm not that cool.
Have you seen his shoes? They're incredible. His shoe
His
game
shoes
is on
and
point.
his like superhero t-shirts. He's
Mhm.
just the coolest. And grassroots apologetics. It's specifically for parents. They have a lot of great resources. Um, and yeah, it's just like you said. I hate to be redundant, but that's kind of our go-tos.
Yeah,
And
those are
Summit
great
Ministries.
places. Oh,
Summit
yeah,
Ministries
that's good.
actually has worldview curriculums that you can use as Bible studies, all the way into like younger grades. It starts with like the Christian worldview. It goes into understanding the times. So it covers all the worldviews and it's progressive. And then eventually when they get older, they can go off to their camp for a week and just learn awesome things about God.
Yeah, so for those of you who are not familiar with Summit Ministries, I think it's a 2-week camp, right?
2 weeks.
And
Yeah.
it's 11th graders, 11th and 12th graders, is that right?
Like 16 to age 22, I believe,
Okay.
and they've got a gap year program.
For
Oh, is it
25?
25? Yeah, and they've got a
Awesome,
gap
yeah.
year program.
Oh,
And
that's right, I
yeah,
heard about that
Yeah.
recently. Okay, so
So
that's a really neat organization, and they do really neat work. Okay, we did have one question come in, and somebody in our audience wants to know if there are any future plans for future Mama Bear Apologetics books. You guys looking at doing anything else?
we actually have one in works right now. And this one, the Apologetics Guide to Culture and then Guide to Sexuality, both books. The one that's actually going to be coming out, I believe, next year is a Mama Bear Prayers for Mama Bears. And so it's a
Oh,
whole book of prayers. It was kind of for Hillary, it was like a glass of cool water to be able to do this book to just devote to prayers and helping you pray over your children, your grandchildren. So yes, we do have one coming out here within the next year, and that's Prayers for Mama Bears.
oh, that's good. I can't wait to see that. That's awesome. Okay, so just as we begin to wrap up, if our online viewers or our in-person viewers want to find where you are and what you do, where's the best place to find you online?
So I have an Instagram called Apologetically Female, and I'm trying to be better at being more active on it. But I write a blog, and if I ever do any teachings and upload them on YouTube, I post them on the Instagram page.
Okay, how about you?
And we're one long word, mamabearapologetics.com. We are on Facebook, we're on Instagram and Twitter as well. One of the neat features of our Facebook page, there should be a little box that you can click that says message. And if you have a question or a struggle that you personally are going through, when you fill that out, it goes directly to our phones. Like it'll ding on my phone, and you oftentimes will do our very best to give a real input. We'll respond back and give you advice, resources. If we don't know the answer, we're going to point you to people that do. And oftentimes we have taken questions that we've received and turned them into blog posts, of course, with the person's permission, based on maybe what you're going through. And so yeah, it's a great resource out there that if there's something going on, you can reach right out to us. There's also Mama Bear communities as well, to where you can chat and connect with other Mama Bears. It's awesome.
And speaking of, and Amy didn't even know that I was going to do this, um, Nancy Piercy, whom you mentioned, is going to be our guest interview next month for Voices of We Are. Our very own Laura Powell is going to interview Nancy Piercy. And if you have not read Nancy Piercy, you are missing a rare gem. She is wonderful. She is super smart, razor sharp, and her writing is very, very readable. And she will really do a lot to help you in those worldview conversations that we were talking about earlier. She will really help you. That's a great interview, and her books are great too. And she's coming out with a new one, apparently.
Yeah, War on Toxic Masculinity. It comes out at the end of the month. So you can pre-order it on Amazon. It is phenomenal. I'm in the book launch, and I've worked down a whole bunch of chapters on the play ride over. It is so good. So you're going to want this book.
Yeah, she's awesome. I love Nancy Piercy. She's the person I want to be when I grow up. Just saying.
Amen.
Okay, so also I wanted to remind you guys to follow Women in Apologetics on their socials, and especially you guys online. If you love what we do here, we love doing what we do here, and we want to do it for a really long time. And so please follow us on our socials so you can stay on top of future conferences and future Voices of WIA episodes and interviews and all that kind of stuff. And if you were to feel led to donate, you can also do that on our website or social media links. You can find that there. We have 10 more minutes until the conference starts. So online viewers, if you are interested at all in the conference and attending the conference and listening to the teachings and the keynotes and the breakouts, you still have 2 more minutes. So go get tickets, download your app, and the hashtag for this weekend. If you want to just keep an eye on the things that are going on this weekend in the conference, the hashtag is 2023 WIAConf. That's WIA, all caps, CONF. And that way you can find us and just kind of see what all's going on with women in apologetics this weekend. So anyway, thank you all for being here tonight for our in-person audience as well as our online audience. I love Voices of WIA. I'm so glad that you're here with us, and I'm looking forward to seeing you at the next episode where Laura will be interviewing Nancy Piercy, which is July 27th. So thank you so much for being online. Go get your live stream ticket, and we'll see you soon. Thank you, guys.